Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's having a great day. I'm Teresa Mueller, the Global Chair for NICAR, and this is a multi-association endeavor. We welcome everyone to these monthly webinars, all associations all over the world, and this session is recorded. So we do ask that during the presentation, everyone turns off their screen as well as mute themselves. So the format is that we will have the presenters, and then afterwards you'll have an opportunity to ask them questions. And then when the Q&A is over, we will stop the recording and have a networking session. And you can feel free to put all your contact information in the chat, as well as needs and wants, anything that's legit in the chat, and then save it afterwards. And we then post these presentations on both our NICAR site as well as YouTube. Always looking forward to talking to different commercial practitioners from all over the world. So if you have any suggestions, we would love to hear who you think should be presenting. We're looking forward to next month. We have a presenter from Turkey, so that he'll talk a little bit about AI as well as inflation, etc. So it'll be a really great presentation. So without further ado, we're going to start with our first presenter, Mr. Caton. Bill is a longstanding member of everything, I think, but additionally NICAR, which is Northern Illinois Commercial Association Realtors. He started this commercial global business network, which is really a one-of-a-kind, unique situation where commercial practitioners, and it doesn't have to just be brokers, it could be lenders, attorneys, developers, anyone can participate, and it gives us an opportunity to constantly be networking beyond MIPIM, Expo Real, or NAR, any of those events. So, Bill, if you would like to add anything, because your resume is very long, and I could talk the whole hour about your resume. If you can go ahead and give a little bit of an intro of yourself.
Teresa, thank you so much. We appreciate who you are and what you do for this organization and for international commercial brokers worldwide. All right. I found out that she's in Nashville today. She's originally here from Naperville, but very seldom is she ever in place whenever we're doing these things. She has the same background, but at different locations. So thank you very much. And I thought I would start today by talking a little bit about where I started in this business, okay, and how did I locate the investors and what results did I see over a period of time. This all started whenever I was president of NICAR in 2014. So that seems like, yesterday to me, but to my 7-year-old granddaughter, it's her whole lifetime, okay, in terms of where she's at. And I also, after making some notes on, what I wanted to point out, I don't have a PowerPoint, as I was kidding with my other two colleagues here today, but I have powerful points. I might hopefully that you agree when I share them with you. All right. So I looked up and I said, everybody Googles everything today. So I Googled, how do you find an investor? And Forbes, okay, had a blog that came up and said, here's 7 ways in which you can find an investor. And they started out with, things such as social media. They also, I got to turn that off. They also talked about blogs and accelerators. Okay, these are all things before my time, and I still have a struggle with that kind of technology. Emails, okay, and then they come up with a few that I have, and which is several people already talked about. Having a project, okay, or an investment that you are working with, all right, and then networking. And here's how I found 3 different ways in which we can make this thing work, and that was organizations is where I started, events from the organization, and then I'm going to talk about a destination which was meaningful to me in making this thing work for me. So starting off with organizations, it was NICAR that started this whole process. And then through NICAR, I got involved with the Illinois Realtors. The Illinois Realtors then sent me to events, and I learned who NAR, National Association of Realtors, attending their conventions. All right, was there. Being a part of the Realtors Land Institute, creating this commercial global business network, which I still think we're the only one that is designated by NAR in this category. And then there are organizations that I belong to, such as CCIM for many, many years, and FIOPSI, area, SOIR, which I've got a lot of friends and respect, okay, that group and organization. So if you have an interest and a passion, or your career asset, okay, that you work in is slanted to one of these organizations, that's where I suggest you start. All right. That's what I did. Now you get into the second area, and that's the events. Well, for many, many years, I went to ICSC in Las Vegas, all right, and networked there, found investors, and made very good connections. But it was not until a meeting that I attended in IR, okay, at a local in the event that they had mid-year, I believe, and they talked about this place called MIPIM, and that they were putting together a group to go to MIPIM, all right, the very first one. And that was a January event, and they were leaving in March. I couldn't make that year, but I made a note and said, I will be on the next one, the very next year. And I believe that was in 2015, okay, that I first attended that. Now, for those of you that maybe are not familiar with Cannes, France. Cannes, France is where they have the film festival. It's right on the Riviera. It's a terrible place to go. Okay. All right. I mean, the restaurants are, lined up and the food is flowing. But in Cannes, France, which is usually the second week in February, I was able to be a part of a delegation from NAR and attend the booth, and then make my way through the whole area of that. The first time you go, it's kind of like a deer in headlights. All right. The second year, I got traction and repeated some relationships that I made the first year, and ran into a gentleman from Germany. And from that, we got introduced to a group called Quarters. We brought Quarters, a company, here to the United States, and was able to put together their largest Quarters event, the co-living event in Chicago on the West Loop. Okay, that started the whole ball rolling. Okay, from MIPIM, okay, in Germany, that relationship, by the way, is still going on today. Even though it started in Germany, that relationship took us to investors in California. All right. And we have investments and investors that my son's working with from California. And he then is also working with investors in places in Nashville, which is where Teresa is at today. So you'll never know where this leads you to. Okay. The other event is something called the Expo Real, which is in Munich. Okay, and I know Teresa has, and several of you may have attended that. That one of the reasons I like that one is it starts the day after the Oktoberfest ends. So if you go a little early, okay, you can have some interactions with the local people and talk about commercial real estate and in a tent situation, which is really good. The NAR has now also started another venue. This will be their third year. I was at the first two, the inaugural one, which was 2 years ago in New York, and last year in New York. This year it's called C5, and I keep forgetting all the C's, so I have to look at them. But C5 stands for Capital, Connections, Commerce, Community, and Commercial. This year, they're teamed up with another great organization, CCIM. And why should you attend? because here's where you're going to get critical information about what's going in the market in terms of trends and technology, but also you're going to meet brokers, investors, owners, landlords, and developers. This is still available. It's going to be September 28th through the 30th in Atlanta. So early registration is already closed, but you can still register. I would encourage you to do that. So networking in person has been my solution to finding investors. Having projects in my hip pocket, like a Fox Lake investment of 110 and a multifamily project, and a startup veterinarian concept, okay, that's looking for investors. These opportunities give me an opening to starting my conversation with what's going on. The last thing I leave you with, okay, is before my esteemed colleagues tell you more details, is a designation that NAR has that I think has helped me quite a bit, and that is the CIPS, okay, and that's Certified International Property Specialist, all right? So if you're not familiar with that, Google it, look at where you can, how you can obtain that, because that'll connect you to about 3,500 to 4,000 people that have a passion about international business and investment throughout the world. And we're, as a group here at Commercial Global Business Network and NICAR, are looking to create a kind of commercial slanted version of that, which will be upcoming. So stay tuned with us and we can get you that information. So thank you, Teresa. And I'm going to now introduce you to William or Bill Price. Now, Bill and I became related through the Commercial Global Business Network. Again, organization and events. All right. And through that relationship, he's, been helping our group and advising us, okay, on the international scene because he's an expert in that. In terms of what to do and what not to do in this business. So, Bill, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you finish your resume and look forward to your presentation.
My primary resume item is that I served for more than 20 years with Ahmed Badat, our other chair who's on this call, in the College of DuPage Small Business Development Center Advisory Board. That was, at the time, run by a fellow named Dave Gay, and he had the busiest Small Business Development Center Advisory Group and busiest center in the United States of America. So we had some good leaders, and it was good to be introduced by Ahmed to this group, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with you. I'm going to share a screen because it would be extremely inappropriate for a lawyer to do anything without, pictures, words, and laws. So what we're going to talk about today is the issues that are associated with international real estate development and organization. There's a lot of different kinds of legal issues you've got to think about. So looking at it, one problem is who are you dealing with? It's not legal to take a share of a real estate deal unless you're licensed as a realtor. Similarly, you can't take a share of a securities deal unless you're licensed as a broker-dealer. So we'll talk a little bit about that and also exceptions like commercial loans for less than 9 months, which might work for your build-outs. We'll then talk about the securities laws associated with reporting of securities raises and disclosures to your potential investors, as well as the agreements you have to go through to make sure that they are committed to giving you money and that you are committed to giving them money back whenever you raise the development and you start producing profits. Finally, on international deals, the U.S. has a couple of different ways where as a supplement to the cash return, investors may be able to get U.S. residency, permission to come to the U.S., and possibly also citizenship. So, starting with licensing, there are many different kinds of people get involved in a deal. You could have realtors, lawyers, accountants, bankers, investment advisors, other finders of money. On the realty side, you have a problem of jurisdiction. Generally, there are local rules, state by state and country by country, on affiliation, and there may be local license requirements for deal participation or referral. There are several here who have done this in international deals, and as you know, you don't necessarily have the same rules when it comes to having a consulting fee. You could also have affiliation with a local realtor or a realty company, or you could have services delivered here and a development be elsewhere with the money received in your home jurisdiction and all of your work done in your home jurisdiction. So those are different ways to make sure your realtor's license covers whatever work you do and you can get paid, which is fairly important in any of these areas. On securities licensing, a security is basically anything except a commercial loan, which depends on the efforts of others to make money. So one exception to that definition, of course, is someone who manages a project. So if you're an issuer for an organization, like Paul has been for Iron Layer Security, you can raise money for that organization. Similarly, if you are a realtor, you function as a realtor, you get paid as a realtor, you're not being paid for raising the securities as long as you're not negotiating the securities themselves, and you're not primarily paid for raising investment, but instead for bringing in others to the deal for different reasons. Other than that, broker-dealer licensing is not that complicated. There are a couple of examinations for different types of securities sales, but in general, the Series 7 and then affiliation with a broker-dealer is what you want to have. I've talked about the short-term loan exception, and so commercial loans may not be SEC regulated. Issuer officer, the SEC has a safe haven rule. It basically says if you've got more than investment sales as a basis for compensation, and the complete safe haven is only one deal per year as such issuer officer. The rule does not actually require that you only participate in one deal per year. And it's not uncommon for issuers to have 2 or 3 raises pending at a time. But to be cautious, you might just try that and otherwise hire broker-dealers to have the sales contact with investors. Fund managers, they use investment advisors, lawyers, broker-dealers, et cetera. I've formed several of these in the last year for people doing real estate developments. And those managers become officers of the fund. They can use broker-dealers to complete the sales process for raising the money. They hold the investments, and then the fund reinvests in a variety of different properties or a variety of different deals. And it's a different reporting than the broker-dealer reporting, and it does not require advanced licenses. The reporting and disclosure laws exist at the federal level here in the US, as well as in every state. So an example, and this would be international, is a private placement. A typical private placement for a real estate deal might raise 10 or 12 million to pay the down payment on a larger loan. There are US documents, they're usually called private placement memoranda. There's rules also in the European Union on such disclosures. Contents are essentially similar. You're required to disclose anything that might be material. In other words, something that an investor would need to know before investing in a project. So what is that? Well, where is the project? What is it? Are we talking multifamily, or are we talking residential, or are we talking some form of resort development? What basic kind of project there is. There might be market studies indicating the market potential for a project. Investors are also going to want to know who runs the project, who gets paid for what in the deal. Is my money going to get put in and then suddenly disappear abroad? These are all worries for investors, so you disclose these things. And if necessary, you follow up beyond the disclosure document and answer the investor's questions. Generally, as Bill said, you can meet investors in meetings. You can talk to them informally. You're not yet engaged in sales until you start getting into more discussion of specific projects and encouragement to do specific deals, at which point you worry about having an appropriate sales staff. And this huge disclosure document, much like a public company prospectus, is not the first thing you talk to people about. When you're doing your initial discussions, the main thing is that you have to have materials which are truthful. And with that, you go on to describe the project, talk to people, get them interested, and then get the lawyers involved and get formal agreements and formal disclosures. There are dollar raise limits for different kinds of private placements. I won't get into that here. Very simple report in the United States goes in. It's called a Form D, which just says how much you intend to raise, what the deal is, where it is, and then that gets modified. It's filing with the SEC when the raise is done. There is an international raise option as well. That's called Regulation S, if you're only raising money abroad. A lot of times, U.S. deals, particularly larger ones, will be the equivalent of small public offerings. And if they are already listed on international exchanges, it isn't necessary to recapitulate all of the disclosures on the U.S. side. This is a notice document, but the difference between the S and the private placement is that the SEC does have to review the Regulation S filing and approve it before you can start the formal sales. There are a lot of agreements involved in any given deal. I recall one of you said they're involved in $1 billion development. You can figure that there's about 1 inch of paper for every $1 million to $10 million involved in a transaction. So $1 billion deal probably has a pile of papers about as tall as Paul is, just to make sure that everyone is taken care of. So what are examples? Well, you could have a developer hiring a U.S. realtor to find unit buyers or investment partners, along with a broker-dealer. Deal agreements. You might need entity fund formation. You might have a direct investment subscription agreement. You might have purchase agreements for the units. You can have construction agreements. More recently, I've seen some international resorts make a token out of every single unit and sell that token as the resaleable item so that people can participate in the profits from a particular unit and can see what those profits are on a blockchain because of regular reporting. Different service providers will be required, whether it's local realtors or U.S. realtors or architects or lawyers or whoever. They all cost money. Site promotion will require entire marketing campaigns and have transactions and deals, whether they be social media or otherwise. Paul Lloyd, our next speaker, has an extensive background in marketing, and he may deviate into that briefly. But whether it's on the social side or otherwise, you certainly need to focus agreements with competent providers. And finally, of course, the site or sites have to be managed. A recent transaction I did was at an $8.2 million sale of 8 properties in the U.S. Virgin Islands and also in Florida. In the Virgin Islands units, there is a resort management company, but the seller also has his own private organization and ownership company, which arranges for insurance, which arranges for payment of vendors, and which does a deal with the resort company to make sure people come in for use of the properties when he's not using them. So different deals, different times. Moving on to visas. There are a variety of types. You've probably heard of H-1Bs, you've heard of EB-5s, you've heard a lot of numbers and names. Well, the most practical and most important for getting people into the US to begin with is usually very easy to get. You don't even use a lawyer, you use a travel agent. What is this? It's business visitor. If you've got a tourist visa, you're coming to the US and you're visiting for the purpose of looking at sites or otherwise. If you're a business visitor, you're coming to do business, whether you're examining a site or going to a conference or whatever. All the US government is concerned with is, do you have a legitimate business purpose? Are you being paid outside the US, not inside the US for work here? And can you prove a business purpose? So fairly easy qualification. Consulates issue these routinely. The only complications come in when you come from a location like Ukraine or otherwise, where they suspect that you're actually a refugee and not a business visitor. In that case, there's more documentation. You may need formal consulate appointments. You may need more time to get in. So people still have been able to get in from there through the US Embassy in Germany. There's a 6-month stay possible, and there are treaties that govern this between different countries. So the common method for Chinese business persons coming into the United States is a B visa, which then is renewable for up to 10 years under treaty with China. That means that someone comes here, they go back, they can have that same visa and have it come out again without the full reissuance process. Disadvantage: no compensation from a US source for work in the USA, and of course, no eligibility for an immigrant visa later, unless another method of application, such as the usual country quota or an EB-5, or other method for trending from non-immigrant to immigrant visitor is used. For investors, the cheaper one has a new name. This is the Immigrant Entrepreneur Parole Rule. So a non-citizen owner and family can be admitted for a period of work in the US on a high potential startup business, and real estate businesses can be such high potential businesses. So can software, so can others. Minimum investment is a little over $264,000. So not the EB-5 numbers of $1 million generally, or $800,000 in a targeted area or with a regional center. Shorter wait times, and this is renewable for up to 5 years in the US. Disadvantage of this type: no immigrant visa eligibility. The proof basically is of the business potential of the business that you're involved in. You've got to be showing something that's going to create economic growth in the United States, that you're investing in it, and that you need to run it. EB-1 executive. If you've got a business that has existed for a period of time, it can, of course, hire executives to run US units. The main thing is to prove that there is an outside organization that has existed for more than a year. Families do get admitted, as they do under the entrepreneur parole. Disadvantage: no immigrant visa eligibility. There are time and business existence requirements for the business outside, and also for the US entity where the executive is going to work. So this isn't something you can do on a 2 to 3 week basis. You have to have a real business. You have to establish a business. And you have to be able to show that somebody's going to work here. And of course, the salary gets paid outside the US. EB-5, this has been less beneficial in the last couple of years than it was 3 to 4 years ago. Primarily because from Mexico, from India, and from China, there have been so many applicants that wait times for eventual visa and completion have gotten up to, I believe it's 17 years as of the June visa bulletin for Chinese potential immigrants. And similarly, a long period of time for those from India. For those from other countries, the wait is not nearly as long. So it depends on where you're from. The advantage is with an investment, $1 million plus, if you've got an independent admission, it's $800,000 through a regional center, which also allows for a quicker processing into the US, but means you're investing in somebody else's deal, not your own. You get family admission, and after the investment creates 10 jobs in 2 years, the green card can be available. In other words, permanent resident, alien eventually eligible for citizenship. If you meet that 10 jobs in 2 years on the project. So there's 2 applications, one to get in, the next one to become green card eligible. Disadvantages, limited numbers of visas per country means a long wait. Capital commitments can be needed a long time before the immigrant can be admitted to the United States. And there's only 10,000 of these issued every year. So that is why the waits exist for some countries. They've had different rules on EB-5s in the last 5 years. The most recent set of rules are based on a court decision which required the government to keep issuing these visas, despite some questions. And the program continues. But like everything else in Washington, D.C., everything is temporary, but generally the temporary programs stay fairly permanent. So if you want to shift investments, you're involved in a regularly profitable business, you can show that it's going to create jobs. This is still, particularly for not high volume countries, a valid way of getting into the country. The application process, low fees for the B1 business visitor, a little bit higher USCIS fee for the immigrant entrepreneur. The executive is the next highest, and the EB-5 is, of course, the highest of the fees they require, and of course requires another fee from the agency at the green card stage. For the immigrant entrepreneur payroll and for the EB-5, you get business plan preparation with accountants and lawyers because you're making a business case as much as you're making a personal case. For the others, you just need to show a business purpose for business travel. And for the executive, you've got to show the existence of the business, that you are employed by that business, and that you will be continuing to work for that business and that it exists for a period of time. Processing times, fairly short for a business visa. Longer if you've got contested entry countries, longer for executive admission, longest of all, as I mentioned, for the EB-5s. So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them now or after we're done. Any questions now?
I would say let's wait until after Paul has his presentation, and then we'll take questions.
That's fine. In which case, I'd like to introduce Paul Lloyd. Paul has a background, started out with Hay Associates after getting his various qualifications. His most notable qualification is as a missile technician. He was with the US Army in Germany, and he tells me that he majored in beer, but in fact, he did some fairly good technical work at the time. Moved on from there, had a very distinguished marketing career, worked for the heavy equipment industry, and had his own agency for many, many years. He's also a science fiction, fantasy, and mystery writer, and has the distinction there of having been #1 on Amazon in, I believe, Denmark and Poland for a couple of different years for sales online. So he can talk about that, but today he's going to talk about how you find investors abroad. He's learned this by being CEO, which is his current gig, of Iron Layer Security. This is a extremely effective online security product, which his son Joseph then moved on to help design the software for the Virginia class of submarines and for Blue Origin spaceships and others that pulled together. And Paul now runs the team. It is a good thing. I hope my children eventually employ me too. So, Paul, you want to start?
Yep. We got to get this.
And Amy's got to get my slides off and your slides off. You then have to share
Yep.
your screen.
Are we ready to go here? There we go. Well, thanks, Bill. I appreciate the introduction with even some fiction and some truthful stuff, which is appropriate for me as a writer of fiction. What I'm going to do is kind of pick up a little bit where Bill left off with how do you find investors, and he focused on the personal interaction. I'm going to just sit here and kind of go with, let's find money. How do we do that? So I'm sort of going to address the kinds of questions that you might have naturally as someone thinking about acquiring funding from an offshore source.
And before you start on that, Paul, Mr.
Yeah.
Price, can you stop sharing your screen so that Paul can?
Yeah, I'm trying to get to that. Is Amy here and on?
Yeah, you
Did
should have
that
a
get rid of it? No, that just got rid of the video with me. I'm trying to get rid of it. I do not know exactly how. I think we'll have to have Paul talk. And if Amy comes on.
Bill, why don't you sign out and come back in? That'll get.
Yeah, I'll sign off entirely.
Yeah, and then just come back in. Okay. So I'm seeing my screen. I don't have any issues with what Bill was seeing. So I'm
We
assuming.
can see it. You're great. We can see it.
Okay, great. Thanks for letting me know. How I got started in doing this is basically from my own needs as a tech company founder. We have a product, as Bill was saying, it's in the cryptography space. It's a non-encryption kind of encryption, if you will, which means that if you try to decrypt it, you can't do it because it's not really encryption in the usual sense. We needed funding to get started. We still are looking for funding. I reached out to investment sources on LinkedIn, but I also, over 30 years of running a marketing business, I had clients that were looking to buy other companies or to be bought out. And so I became connected to a number of investment type sources, angel funds, and people of that nature. So I had a pretty good source of potential investors. In the beginning, these were all domestic, but the overseas connections have come through LinkedIn. The thing that I did that I think is just a good idea for you as well is when you're looking for money, it's not something where you go out and say, I'm going to go find some people. It really is a strategic process. You have to have a plan and then execute the plan. And the thing that a lot of people miss out on in these things is track the results. When you track the results, you learn what you're doing well, you learn what you can improve on, and helps point you to making better decisions and getting better results over time. So the big question is, where is the money? It's offshore. It can come from any location. The Mideast money, the oil money, obviously is the one most people think of first. But if you're in Canada and you've got a lot of money, you need to, Canada is a huge country in terms of square miles, but in terms of investment opportunities, they usually have money to share. And the same is true with other regions of the world. And the main reason you go offshore is you follow Willie Sutton's advice, because that's where the money is. And so let's go see if we can find some of that money. The main thing that going offshore does for you is it expands your options. You've got domestic options, but why not get more term sheets if you can? One of the things that's important about all this is the U.S. economy really is attractive to investors and lenders. And I want to just explore that a little bit. The two main reasons why offshore money wants to invest in your project, in addition to the fact that you've got an attractive project in itself, the U.S. economy is considered very strong long term. We have our ups and downs like any other economy, but in the long term, your money is safer here than anywhere else in the world. And then the idea that we're a peaceful society, which I was really hesitant to put that line up there because of how our country is going these days. But from the viewpoint of someone offshore, the U.S. market is a secure, peaceful environment generally, and you're thinking longer term than the latest riot or latest political scandal or what have you. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, I received an email from the CEO of very large investment banking firm offshore, Cayman Islands. And he just states exactly what it is that makes the U.S. an economy where people want to invest. So the point here is people offshore are looking for you. They want to meet you. They want to see your project. If you've got a good project, they're interested. And good projects to them, they'll tell you $1 million and up, but they're really looking in the 5 to 50 million range. Larger deals, they can cobble together some investors and go on from there. One of the challenges going overseas, especially the first time you do it, is, can I trust these folks? Well, one way to help with this is a non-disclosure agreement, which at least, actually does two things. One is it lays down the law. This is a contract. We're serious about it. And the thing about an NDA is if they're a crook, it doesn't mean anything. But if they're legitimate, hopefully we're dealing with legitimate investors, they're going to honor that. They're going to sign that. They're going to welcome that as a way of assuring that both sides are in agreement. The other thing that it does is it lays out the ground rules for how you will work together. When folks are coming into a new market, they're not always sure of how to do business in that market. As part of my marketing business, I sort of developed a specialty in offshore European and Asia Pacific companies who wanted to come into the US market. And the biggest challenge they had with their marketing is they totally did not understand the US market. For example, in Europe, the way purchases get made is the CEO of a company and maybe his other C-levels will go to a trade show and they'll bring contracts. And when they see something they like, they get the contract signed. That's how businesses in Europe market. They go to trade shows. In the US, you go to trade shows, you meet people, they're salespeople, and I'm sure you know that leads to discussions and other things. And we really need to get the word out about the company so that the buyers will know about them. So it's much more complex marketing place. That's one of the hardest things for companies coming in from offshore to pick up on. And so it's kind of the same thing here, the ground rules. The NDA lays out those ground rules. You want to due diligence, it can be as simple as checking the website. These investment groups all have websites that you can check out. You can see who the principals are. You can see they'll often have a mission statement or some kind of statement of how they like to do business. When I put down considered a source, I was thinking about how did you learn about these people? If you're on LinkedIn, for example, and an offshore person were to contact you, then do they have 27 followers or do they have 500 plus? Because 27 followers probably is not a good source. The other thing you want to do too, especially the first time around, is make sure you have the experts you need at the Bill Cattons, the Bill Prices of the world. And then things that you can be looking at is this openness to making connections, building a network. Bill Catton talked about that earlier. We're here today with a very important association of real estate related folks, and turn to these types of sources. As Bill did a great job of talking about these, so I won't dwell on that. And then, connect with your current professional service advisors. If they're out in the marketplace working with multiple clients, they may well be connected to somebody that they could recommend for you. And then I wanted to spend just a little bit of time on LinkedIn. I'm one of the first 750,000 subscribers to LinkedIn, so I was with it very early on. And one of the things in the beginning was this concept of lion. You don't hear that anymore, at least I don't see it or hear about it anymore. And the idea was to be a LinkedIn open networker, which meant that if anybody invited me to connect with them, I would just connect automatically. Over time, you learn that that's not a good idea because there are spy networks, there are hackers who will try to get information from you. And so you want to be careful about who you connect with. Well, within that framework, you do want to look for opportunities to connect, especially outside of your normal connections. If you see somebody and they're obviously a good connection for you, sure, you're going to make the connection. But you may not realize that someone outside of your normal network of people you'd want to connect with may make a good connection for you down the road. They may know people that would be good connections for you to make referrals, or they just may have some interesting things to say. So be open to that. It's a social media network, so it's kind of like Facebook. You participate in the conversation and get to meet more people that way. You get to share your wealth of knowledge, which is a good thing. The thing about LinkedIn, because I see so much of this being done wrong, is it's a marketing and PR tool. It's not a sales tool. And that's an important consideration. Also, recruiters love LinkedIn because you can find people that you are looking for when you're hiring. But it's not a sales tool. Of course, the final point is it's not a sales tool. So I think I beat that one to death, but the idea is make sure you're connecting with people and having conversations with them and inviting them to participate in ways that make sense to both of you. So to wrap this up, simply, we talked about, and Bill Cutton hit on this very hard, the idea of networking, the idea of connecting with people, and I would add the idea of learning about people and learning about opportunities offshore. So I want to thank you, and when I guess we're going to go in a Q&A right about now, right? So I'm going to stop the share and turn it back over.
Thank you very much, Paul, Bill, and Bill. So if any of you have questions, go ahead and raise your hand, and we will call on you. We're coming up on the hour, so would like to take a few questions. And I'm sure a lot of you are on various networking sites such as LinkedIn, et cetera. So that's why I do encourage in the chat that you put your contact information in there, and you can save the chat at the end and connect with everyone here, whether it be LinkedIn, Facebook, or wherever is your preferred site. So I'm going to take a few questions. I'll start with Dr. Mustafa. If you want to unmute yourself, and you can put yourself on video as well.
Yeah, so my question is with Bill is about consulting fees. What would be the difference of having a consulting fee as opposed to having a commission from real estate?
The consulting fee is defined very, very loosely, but in general, you have a specific advisory or other task that you do. A lot of times I tell people, go ahead and produce a report or some other equivalent. And usually you don't get a percentage of the deal when it sells. You get paid a fee to work, and you might get a monthly, you might get a weekly, you might get some other equivalent, but it's not the same as the usual realtor's fee, which is a percentage of a deal whenever a sale happens. Beyond that, it's a matter of, well, whatever the local law is that says you are doing realty activity. That's defined by statute here in Illinois. Elsewhere, it doesn't have as clear a definition.
Okay, thank you.
For some reason, I couldn't find my unmute button. I'd like to expand on this, and maybe Bill Caton can speak to this. He's saying, okay, I'm working with these investors. He's based out of Illinois. He's not licensed in other states. So maybe, Bill, you could talk a little bit about what you're doing with other brokers and referral fees, et cetera, because, a lot of times you go internationally and they might not be looking in Chicago or wherever, but you are still able to facilitate a transaction.
Yes, thanks, Teresa. First, I would say you need to make sure that you have a firm grip of the licensing laws in other states, because every state has a different set of rules and regulations. There's basically 3 different classifications throughout the United States. I'm not going to get into that. That's a whole nother webinar in itself. But you need to make sure you know which of those you are. Are you in a blue state, a green state, okay, et cetera, and then how you operate. So having license portability information available to you. And luckily, our CEO, Amy Hall, is an expert in that. And we have worked with the expert that created a lot of this throughout the United States. So we have the ability to do transactions in every state in the United States, okay, following that, along with our network of people that we put together. All right. When we start moving out of that to international, I still have from my trips to MIPIM contacts that I'm working with in the UK and London, in Barcelona, Spain, the Ivory Coast of Africa. These are connections that I've made through multiple trips. So I've met them in person or email contacts. So I have a very good relationship working with them. All right. And in terms of knowing that when we do the deals that we're talking about, that I will get paid. All right. And we can work those things out. So that's my advice in that arena. I'm going to give a little testimonial right now. I didn't do that up front because I wanted you to meet these two gentlemen in the order that I did, which was Bill Price first and then Paul. In that we are working on two of my deals right now, and out of I guess the mother invention is always said to be necessity. And since I had two projects that I needed investors with, I kept looking through different sources and ran into this. So Paul was put together along with Bill's expertise in the paperwork. We're expecting a term sheet here for one of my projects in Fox Lake, which is a $20 million, 110 unit multifamily complex that he's working on. Another deal is in the $7 million range, which is a veterinarian concept, kind of like the Walmart of veterinarian care, where you can get everything under one roof. And they need to purchase a building and start up funds. So those are the kind of things that you can expect to fund, out of relationships, such as Bill and Paul.
Thank you very much, Bill. Ahmed, do you have a question? If you can unmute yourself.
Yes. So I have a question for Paul Lloyd. Paul, so one of the considerations you mentioned, which is an important one, looking at non-conflict countries, strong economy, but what about corruption in those countries? So when you go to the transparency.org, which is the perceived levels of public sector corruption scoring from 0 to 100. And that is something I'm always looking at. I want to see how viable is a society for an investor. Is that one of the considerations also that your investors would be looking into?
Yeah, we're not especially concerned about corruption in an offshore country because the money is flowing to us, and it will either be released or not. The people that I deal with are in places like London, Cayman Islands, Dubai, places that are have their own issues, but the environment is such that those investors are there because of advantages that are there, not just in terms of taxes, but also in terms of their ability to move money wherever they need to move it globally. So it's not like we're dealing with some of the notoriously corrupt type locations.
Thank you.
Bill Price, do you want to speak a little bit towards the homeland security and how we need to make sure that this money is legit and doesn't come from, illegal sources? Because that's one of the concerns of that the government has when they're bringing money into
the government has this concern, and for the issuer, it's almost impossible to verify. So what you do is you work with the bank. They have access to those databases. Before anything can be brought in from a foreign bank account to a U.S. bank account, they have to vet the source. You basically get people to certify that it's not from an illegal source. You do a credit rating, obviously, on the individuals as far as you can. You do the SEC type of bad actor check from one of the bad actor check services. But again, that will just check whether somebody's had a complaint to one or more U.S. regulators or has a criminal conviction that they can show. International criminal, basically, I have to depend on the banking source itself to go through the process of reporting. And there is reporting to what's called FinCEN. which is a unit of the U.S. Treasury. And every time money goes across the border, it does get reported there.
Thanks, Bill. That's, I think, one of the concerns a lot of people, wonder how you get that accomplished. So I appreciate that update.
You get a real international bank, not a local bank.
Thank you very much, Bill, and Paul. We are going to wrap this up as we are over the hour. So we will stop the recording in just a minute here, but everyone is welcome to stay on and advertise where you're coming from. If you have any needs or wants, we'll just sort of do an express networking, and we'll look forward to seeing many of you next month when we have a special guest from Turkey. So this recording will be available on the NICAR site as well as our YouTube site. And if Paul and Bill, you want to submit your slides to Amy, she can also have those available on the webpage. And if there are any further questions, feel free to contact me, any of the presenters, as well as save the chat, which has everyone's contact information. Thank you, everyone, for attending.